This is the last presentation of this conference. We've come to almost to the close of the second day. Lisa is from Verizon, and she focuses on developing and executing digital strategies for enriching customer experience across omni-channel, which is a very generally more of a telco term, but what it really means is across all ways that people communicate with the company. In case of telecom, for example, you could be calling a customer support center, you could be accessing support services online, you could be doing it through an app and so on, right? So that's omni-channel, and that's your focus these days. But I think you also worked across many industry verticals in the past on content strategy and digital strategy. So Lisa, please take it from here.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Atul, for inviting me to present. This is a very interesting theme for the conference. And I'm going to try to share a new way of thinking about customer experience in these days of, well, shall we say, during and post-COVID. Yeah. So what we're going to review is hopefully an easy to remember model for creating your digital strategy. Central to the continued growth and sales in today's omni-channel universe, there is a need to have a customer-centric strategy. Yet, how we align the front end, the back end experiences to work can really be a daunting and challenging task. So what I hope to share with you is an approach that I've begun to bring to my own professional practice, which is really based upon my own personal interest and practice of yoga. So maybe this would be a good time, Atul, to add the poll, just to get a sense of how many people in the audience have done yoga or do meditation. Would that be possible?
Yeah, I just launched a poll. So folks, you should be seeing a poll on your screen. Please respond.
I'm unable to see the results, so maybe
you are, because I launched it. So I'll tell you what it is. Yeah. So I think we have 67% saying that they have experience practicing yoga or meditation, and about 33% saying no.
Terrific. Okay, then I am talking to people who really probably understand the value and the virtue of bringing this ancient practice into our modern living. As I was saying, why yoga? Well, I was inspired by years of practicing yoga, where I've found that the principles that originated literally over 5,000 years ago in India can correlate with an understanding of the human condition today. And because basically the way our brains work, the stimuli, the things that impact us as humans really haven't changed in all these thousands of years. And so in order to kind of understand how to bring customer experience in our modern technical world, it's kind of interesting to think about the human condition in general and how these practices could have an influence. I personally began my yoga practice about 15 years ago, while at the same time I was working on the agency side as a user experience user experience designer, and helping dozens of Fortune 500 companies transform their digital properties. You know, it's funny because one of the previous speakers was talking about digital transformation. Well, I've been working towards trying to bring digital transformation to Fortune 500 companies for going on 20 years. And it is a very hard, slow, progress that I'm seeing, even in the biggest companies like Verizon. So now here I am at Verizon, And my yoga practice has not only helped me personally deal with the day-to-day stresses and challenges, but interestingly has provided a form of framework to help me create a more harmonious customer engagement opportunities across, as Atul was saying, all the different channels and platforms and devices, otherwise known as omni-channel universe. So before I continue, I just need to kind of say a disclaimer here that everything, although I work at Verizon, everything that I'm about to share with you is my own personal opinion and not that of Verizon. So, creating a good customer experience. As probably most of you know, what does that mean? It means responding to a customer's needs, removing obstacles, and frankly, being able to anticipate next steps, especially if we're going to move more and more towards personalization. In the telecom industry, we have a framework known as LBGUPS, which is learn, buy, get, use, pay, stay, or leave. And I'm sure that different industries, they have their own framework, but this one, although it is really an accepted framework in the industry, and frankly, I think originated at McKinsey or something, it's built upon a lot of assumptions of what customers in each of these phases are that we anticipate them to do, but not necessarily what they really do or how they're feeling about that experience along the way. And when customer experience fails, well, we all know the customer feels stress, frustration, inadequate, overwhelmed, uncertain. They feel judged and frankly, angry. I don't know how many of you look at your customer responses online, polls, surveys, feedback, but if they fail at the customer experience, we usually hear about it. So what I did was I started to put together a list of what are the components of creating a good customer experience, and then let's compare it to what are the principles of yoga. And as you can see, at the heart of both are a lot of similar things. For customer experience, the ideals are really about instilling trust, listening to the needs of the audience, creating internal alignment that will frankly help our customers reach their objectives. Excuse me one second. Similarly, in principles of yoga, well, that framework provides guidance related to having empathy, compassion, truthfulness, letting go of things that are not needed, being mindful, and starting each day with a positive intention. So yoga provides a framework for the physical, mental, and spiritual disciplines that are based upon a set of principles known as yamas and niyamas. And these were really a set of ethics or rules for living right, which affected one's relationship with oneself and others. So we have the yamas that are more moral and ethical guidelines that impact society, and niyamas that represent more of a to-do list, things that perhaps a person, if they integrate it into their life, will have a better chance of living life well. So interestingly, as we think about the post-COVID world, recently there was an article by McKinsey, it came out in October of this year, where they're talking about the 3 building blocks of a successful customer experience in the transformation. And I was just so amused to see that, again, there are all these parallels. So in yoga, we talk about having an intention when you start your practice. Usually for those of you who do yoga, usually in the beginning and perhaps throughout your yoga class, you are reminded to think about a good intention. Well, here Mackenzie is saying it's really important to also have a clearly defined aspiration. And aspiration is another word for intention. Because the building and I'm going to quote really from the article, building an aspiration and purpose is achieved by developing a customer-centric vision and establishing a link to a value to the customer and translating these insights into a roadmap. And frankly, they couldn't have said what I'm about to tell you better, because that is something that I'm going to get a little more into. Their second building block is having an agile transformation approach. And so what this means is that, well, certainly having something like an agile system like Jira or something like that is really important, because we don't reach the finish line at first. There are constant iterations that help us reach more of a satisfying experience. But to do that, you have to build capabilities. You have to have technology, data, analytics, as well as cross-functional governance and an agile operating system in order to continually measure your success along the way from both an analytics as well as a customer experience perspective. And then speaking about analytics, everything we do in digital is about measurement, right? So part of building this is then being able to measure it at the end. So let's start with the first principle, awareness. In yoga, a lot of it is really about controlling your breath and holding tough positions, having self-observation of how you're reacting to things along the way, and most importantly, being present and non-judgmental really of yourself. So how do you create meaning and value to customers and remain attuned to what they're going through? In this day and age, and certainly in the future, our customers are demanding nothing less. In terms of reaching that objective of having a good intent, well, you have to also not only be observing the customer, but then providing tactics and solutions that respond to what you're hearing. In yoga, we're always reminded to observe our own reaction to things and to remind ourselves that you are in control of how you react. When it comes to our customers, they can react whatever way they want, and they are rightful in letting us know through their online comments and other ways that we can get insight, of course, is usability studies, ethnographic research, chat, analytics. So observation is really key to providing a genuine, relevant, and meaningful customer experience. But as I have found in my own practice, small changes can often make really big differences. But change takes time, and at a certain point, things will change, sometimes because there is no other choice. When things really are starting to break down, then that's your opportunity to step in and say, let me see what our customers are going through so I can make it something that will be more satisfying and meet their needs. And at the heart of that, in order to achieve this, is really having empathy, right? So it's not only empathy towards the customer, but it's also sharing that so that your team that you're working with will have a better understanding and empathy to the user, and creating content that helps the customer self-identify, empowers them to solve problems. But we have to also do this with compassion. I remember talking about the last speaker when I worked a long time in on pharma, and I was working on projects for some of the new medicines coming out for for HIV. And the thing is that the teams, they were being very mean in terms of their reaction to people who had this disease, saying, oh, well, they're drug dealers, they, it's their fault, this and that. But when you start hearing the stories of the patients and really understanding what they're going through, then you can have a lot more compassion, and the way you market it, the way you message it can have much more meaning and relevance to those patients. So, as McKinsey mentioned, aspiration, it's all about forming a good intention, because the intention acts as a reminder to yourself and your team of the change that you're trying to bring about. We heard from, I believe the gentleman's name was Joe earlier, about the systems and how hard it is, especially in telecom, to make these big changes. Well, in my own experience, I find that there really is a lack of balance between the front end and the back end systems. In yoga, we talk about balance and alignment, and it's really about having a strong rooted position, because the more you are rooted in your stance and the more you have a steady mind, the better you can balance. Unfortunately, in many environments, they haven't built their solid foundation. So building everything else above it doesn't seem to work, because things are not connected. And you have legacy systems and new systems, and you also have lack of an appetite to really make the change that's necessary, or for people to do new jobs and new roles that they didn't see themselves doing before. So as more and more content is produced, there's also more and more platforms and devices and distribution centers. So this omni-channel universe makes the balance and alignment even more difficult. And we find that sometimes the poor decisions of the past can lead to big disasters in terms of how things are working today. Let me give you an example. In a recent project, and now I'm talking more like marketing, the slightest change in terms and conditions can send the organization into a tailspin, because rather than having structured content and having one source that can be published everywhere, or as the term is known at COPE, create once, publish everywhere, without that, now you're having to track down every single place that terms and conditions exists, and have to figure out manually where it is and how you can change it, and all the IT teams impacted, and on and on and on. So something that could literally take an hour to fix could take weeks. And we see this because our systems really are not set up, and there's a lack of coordination based upon the silo teams. So what do? We have to make adjustments, right? We have to not be afraid to alter our position, because again, small adjustments can make a huge difference. So if in yoga, if you're gripping and holding on to that position, chances are you're going to fall. You're not going to really achieve that balance. But like yoga, we can't be afraid to alter our posture and frankly, provide affordances to help our customers succeed and have less friction. So we need to be ready to make those adjustments and enhancements and be open to new ways of doing things. And when I say affordances, well, just like in yoga, we put a block there to help that position. In customer experience, there are cues and there are things in there that can help our customers have more success in achieving the tasks that they set out to. And sometimes when big problems seem overwhelming, We have to break them down into smaller, achievable goals. And that's where the Agile process comes in. That's where working in Jira or a similar system can help, because even the smallest change can make a big difference. Let me tell you a story that someone shared with me. Actually, it came to me through my yoga instructor, and it's the story of the bumblebee. Anatomically, think about it, there's no reason that a bumblebee should be able to fly, but they don't know that, nor are they limited by thinking about it. They just fly. So when we don't put limitations on ourselves, like we never did it that way before, or they will never go for it, or then we limit the possibilities for the change that we can bring about. So another principle is finding the connections. In yoga, we talk about the interconnectedness of all living things. Well, in digital, we also have to be aware of those connections and how one piece impacts another. Think about the semantic relationships of a given product. Let's say buying a phone. How many other things are impacted from the time a customer signs up and they activate their phone to getting device protection or paying the bill? So we have to think about those connections and that terminology and the semantics, so that when they are going through this experience, we're saying things the same way, and customers are able to find things that are related. And the importance here is really about the taxonomy and the consistency in terminology and what we can present proactively across the entire journey. I'm sorry. Here, so change. At its core, creating a good customer experience is really about connecting to human needs. People don't need hospitals, they need a way to remain healthy. People don't need cars, they need a way to get around safely so that the cars won't pollute. And people, frankly, don't need phones, they need a way to communicate and be in touch with loved ones. So when we are creating this customer experience, we have to think bigger. Now, my background is actually in acting, and I studied with one of the grand dames of theater, Stella Adler. And when I was a student in her class, she would always talk about, make it bigger, darling. And we literally need to make these things bigger, because that is how we will connect with people and literally make it a better world. So another quote that I love from Deepak Chopra is that every time you are tempted to react in the same old way, ask if you want to be a prisoner of the past or a pioneer of the future. And sometimes you just have to take the risk. At some point, change will have to occur because, as Anais Nin says, it's more painful to remain in a bud than to take the risk and blossom. In order to become a customer-centric organization, chances are there's a lot of change going on. Your role could be changed, the technology could be changed, there's new things to learn, new ways of engaging. So it's easier, thinking about yoga, to relax into the new posture. And sometimes we do get stuck in the old ways of doing things because they're safe. I don't know how many of you have heard this expression, but no one ever got fired for hiring IBM. But now there are all sorts of new ways of doing things, especially with smaller firms that have specialties, like in content engineering or in new technologies. And acceptance. Yoga is not a competition with a finish line. And although our work can be competitive, there's never really a finish line. Change truly is a process. It's not a means to an end. So as our President Obama once said, don't let perfect be the enemy of possible. And remember, yoga at its heart is really a breathing exercise. In order to succeed and make change, it's easier if you can relax, ease into new postures and positions than force things. Observation is the key to providing a genuine, relevant, meaningful customer experience. Small changes can make big differences. Start with small modifications that can make big changes. And change takes time, but at a certain point, it has to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Very interesting, calming, soothing presentation. And hats off to you for doing your first presentation on a brand new MacBook.
I did.
And going without a flaw.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any questions?
Yeah. Any questions, guys? I'll ask a few if nobody does. So you talked about, when talking about empathy, you talked about times when the HIV crisis was at its peak. I think empathy is just more, if not more important today, right?
Absolutely.
In the current crisis.
Yep.
Rather than becoming a polarized world, we need empathy.
And also, I think that interestingly, if we start listening to our customers, think of all the industries that are going to be impacted post-COVID. Mm-hmm. So think about the clothing industry.
Yeah.
Who dresses up anymore? I mean, like, I know that you have your sports jacket on because of this, but in normal days, you know, people aren't wearing business clothes.
Yeah.
So that's going to change. Yeah. How the tools they use in their home, that's going to change. Yeah. I read somewhere that people are going through and having to buy more and more dishwashers because since everyone's home, they're not meant to be used that much. And so now we have to buy new appliances.
Yeah. Yeah, the new normal is going to impose a lot of changes in behavior in both consumers and enterprise customers, and businesses have to think differently to observe and understand what those behavior changes are.
Yes.
And then adapt to them.
Yes.
Yeah. So any other questions, folks? We have one. So it's asking about the impact of digital transformation on the propagation of yoga.
That's funny. Well, I'll tell you, that's a great juxtaposition. Yeah. Not how yoga will impact digital, but how digital will impact yoga.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that it has enabled me to continue my practice.
Right.
I literally do an online course 3 times a week in my living room. And I feel so grateful and so blessed that I can continue this practice with my yoga instructors because of technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is becoming increasingly common these days. I mean, whether it's fitness classes, yoga, or other forms of therapy, you invariably are using digital techniques to stay connected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, the yoga instructors, they've done such a masterful job in managing the Zoom that that they have the audio coming through. Everything now is nice and balanced. And frankly, it has enabled us to continue a feeling of community, of being together.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Any other question? Okay, I think more than anything else, this was just a very good set of guiding principles for designing customer experiences and customer journeys. So really appreciate the presentation.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Certainly.